From Geppetto Studios in New Freedom, Pennsylvania, welcome to the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast, your home for inclusive, positive geek culture, where we talk about movies, comics, music, books, and whatever else we feel like. Please welcome your host.
It's like he let the mask slip.
Brad Mendenhall.
Hey kids, it is episode 252 of the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast. Two of my favorites, Sarah Black and Dr. Anna Peppard, are back to talk about the latest in the Joss Whedon saga. It is sad subject matter, but with really cool people. Anywho, you know what we haven't done in a while? A Katie's Question.
What villain would make a good babysitter?
That's a good one. The first name that pops into my mind is Lex Luthor, and I'm specifically thinking of the Lex Luthor from comics, as opposed to not the movie, because in the comics he's more of a genius, businessman, political figure, behind the scenes guy, and very calculating. In the movies he's more of like a mafia don-esque sort of guy with weird real estate plans. But in the comics, he's definitely still a bad guy, but not a bad guy who kills or destroys people willy-nilly. He is, as long as I've always gotten the impression of the way that he's most often, especially in like the last 20-30 years, as long as you're not in his way, he's not going to go out of his way to destroy people. So, like, if you're in a situation where you ask Lex Luthor to babysit your kid, the rich, really, really, really smart guy, could be worse. Green Goblin, Joker, more of the unhinged characters, they're going to end up like tying some sort of weird bat-shaped bomb to your kid to lure the Black Batman out. Lex Luthor, I think he would just take it seriously. So, yeah, Lex Luthor. I am really excited, not because it's a fun subject matter, because it's not, but I have pulled together two of my absolute favorites, two people who I have an enormous amount of respect and affection for, the two of the best guests, and who I believe this is the first time meeting, but from I always butcher the name of your podcast, the Oh Gosh, Oh Golly, Oh Wow.
That's right.
Dr. Anna Peppard. Doc, how you doing?
Hanging in there, like most of us, doing the best I can.
Also joining us is another favorite, let's see if I butcher your podcast, Life is a Playlist podcast. One of my favorites, Sarah Black. Sarah, how are you doing?
Good. Really glad to be here.
You're not a doctor, are you, Sarah?
No, I'm a non-tenured professor, so we kind of got the professor title through the back door. So
we got professors and doctors, and then me. Am I right? This is the first time you guys meeting?
Yes, it is, as far as I know.
You guys are going to like each other so much.
I'm sure that we will.
You're both so awesome and so bright, and I am... This is a subject that bums me out, because Joss Whedon finally came out of wherever he's been hiding to defend himself and made it so much worse. And I was like, well, I got to talk about this. And I'm like, this is going to bum me up. I was such a huge Whedon fan, but what'll make me feel better is having you two. It's like, okay, well, at least I have a reason to be happy about it. Anna, you weren't actually that big a Whedon fan. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was the right age for Buffy, and I should have been a big fan of it. A lot of my friends were at the time, but it just wasn't something that resonated with me in that moment in my life. I was a little bit more, I was pretty genderqueer as a teenager, pretty big jock, and just something about, and again, it's hard to talk about because it's a very complicated show, and I appreciate it more in retrospect, but it's just at the time, kind of that image of Sarah Michelle Gellar, the blonde cheerleader who was in the CoverGirl ads, that just wasn't the kind of heroine I was looking for when I was 15. It just wasn't kind of something that jived with my kind of dark shaved head, playing basketball 4 hours a day kind of vibe that I had at that time. So it wasn't something I got into at that time. Although I have, of course, since consumed many Whedon properties. I did enjoy Firefly. I've, of course, watched the superhero stuff, but yeah, and I have read much academic writing about Buffy on account of I study superheroes and action films, and especially female action heroes. So I am well versed in the discourse around Buffy, despite not actually having it as part of my formative kind of upbringing.
It's so challenging because we've just been hearing stuff for the last months, years really, and Whedon hadn't responded at all. And then finally, he did an interview. It was tough. It was going to be tough to believe that he could fix it. So, Sarah, what does Joss Whedon mean to you? Were you a Whedon fan before all this happened?
I wouldn't say that I was a Joss Whedon fan in particular, but I was definitely a fan of his work. I actually watched Buffy for the first time after it had been on for years and just happened to catch a couple of episodes, and then wasn't really expecting to like it because it's not my genre, but fell in love with it. And so watched all of Buffy, all of Angel, all of Firefly. Those were my go-to shows. So if I was ever stressed, if I was ever having a bad day, those were definitely what I went to. But I didn't really know a lot about him or his work like outside of those shows.
Now, did you watch Dollhouse?
I started to, but even then, I didn't really like it. Like, I didn't connect with that show as much. I don't think I had the language, or maybe didn't really know how to articulate why it bugged me. But yeah, I didn't really care for that show as much.
Yeah, I remember when Dollhouse came out, and I it's not that I've been like a Joss Whedon hater or something before that, but I was already at the point where that came out where I had some reservations about certain ticks in his work, and that show just had some red flags for me in terms of some of those ticks, and it wasn't something I was super up for at that time when it came out. And I mean, that was before the bulk of the allegations had come out and everything, but I'd already had experiences before then of this stuff is so hard to talk about because I don't want to simplify any of the issues, and because a lot of his work means so much to so many people, even if he as a person doesn't necessarily mean so much to those same people anymore. But I had experiences before then of doing conference papers about female action heroes and sort of actually getting pushback about critiquing any of the representations of women in some of his stories, which is a weird experience because it's an academic space in which we're there to critique everything. But I think my response to some of that defensiveness had made me a little bit suspicious of his work as well. So yeah, I've had like some weird experiences with his work. I guess I'll put it that way.
Dollhouse for me I think it was the first time I really questioned his work. His whole bag had been he wrote for women. He was an ally. In Firefly, he already had Inara, the prostitute, but then turning that into a companion and toying around with the power dynamics there. But Dollhouse, just the whole vibe of every episode, you would have Eliza Dushku as Echo, her personality being wiped away, and sometimes she's an adventurer, and sometimes she's a doctor or whatever the need is. But so many times it just ended up being her fulfilling somebody's sexual fantasy, be it in the first episode where, a young guy just wanted to have like a kick-ass girlfriend for his birthday, or Patton Oswalt wanting to bring his wife, wanting to be able to interact with his wife, whatever it was. And it just felt creepy to me. That was the show of Whedon's that didn't caught on. There was never any call for more seasons of Dollhouse on a streaming service. People are still hoping for more Firefly.
Right. It's like he let the mask slip. Like he had the mask up when he was doing Buffy and Angel and even Firefly. Like he was very careful, almost calculated in a way, about how much of his actual self he let in, if that makes sense. And with Dollhouse, it's like he let that mask slip and he was showing, like, I built up this goodwill through these other shows. I have this reputation of being a feminist, and now I can let this slip a little bit and show more of who I actually am and how I think. And I don't think that's a good thing, but
Yeah, I remember reading the premise of the show and just being kind of unnerved by that premise and just being in a headspace where I wasn't particularly trusting this creator with this premise at that time.
He gives himself permission to be a jerk, and he's above reproach because he has a series, a female-led series, and he creates quote-unquote strong characters and strong female characters. Being that ally, he then turned it around as like, yeah, I'm an ally, and here I'm having brainwashed prostitutes out of all these strong women. It was something that was said in the article about how he apparently told someone that the character he most related to in Dollhouse, if not most of his work, was Topher, the guy whose job it was to brainwash everyone and install the personalities. And that was telling and upsetting to read.
yeah, that gave me chills when I read that, honestly. That whole article was really interesting. Like, he didn't take ownership for anything. He doesn't seem to have any self-awareness whatsoever, and also gave really telling glimpses about himself, like with that, or with the Richard III comparisons, or talking about going back, or talking about when he was in school and that he, quote, had an advantage over the girls in his college class on feminism when it came to discussing relations between the sexes. I have seen the enemy and he's in my brain. The fact that he considers himself a better feminist than women, and that he can, I don't know. I lost the thought, but that quote also just, he told on himself a lot in that article. Let's put it that way.
And I mean, that kind of introspection could, in theory, be really valuable, depending what you're doing with it. I mean, recognizing the negative impulses in yourself, recognizing the way that you've been poisoned by patriarchy or whatever, and then doing something with that and kind of working on yourself and kind of figuring out what that means. That could be one thing that you could do, right? But instead, it really just feels like in that article, and sort of, I would say almost increasingly in some of his work with something like Dollhouse, it sort of almost seems like going in the opposite direction, leaning into the impulses with increasing lack of like self-reflection, which, is a lot of projection, but I think that reading is certainly present in terms of how the New York Magazine piece kind of sets him up.
The thing that really struck me about that piece was that's his side of the story.
Yeah.
The author of the piece definitely pushed back on stuff. It seemed like it wasn't a puff piece per se, but it was definitely giving Whedon his own chance to set the record straight from his perspective. So that's his side of the story, and it was terrible. I was a Joss Whedon fan. Serenity is one of my favorite movies. Dr. Horrible sing-along blog, I love that. And I thought the Marvel movies that he directed, the two Avengers films, I didn't think they were great per se because it was definitely work for hire. But I appreciated that those movies could have been, and by all accounts should have been, terrible. And he was able to put together something coherent that was sort of fun. So there's a prejudice that I have, and I think it's pretty common, where if it's someone that you like or you like their work, you want to believe that they're a good guy. With that prejudice, like I have a prejudice that was sort of going in his favor, and I walked away and was like, oh wow, he is an ass.
Yeah, he didn't do himself any favors whatsoever, and that's what I don't understand. On the one hand, does he not have people like handler, like people who, even if he was really fake, like, wouldn't he be calculated enough to be fake? Like, he didn't do himself any favors from beginning to end. It was just excuse after excuse after excuse, with in between him just telling on himself with these various like anecdotes and stories. But I was young, I was uncivilized, I was unmannerly, my cast was young. It's like there was never anywhere where he took ownership for anything. And I'm like that too. I mean, I teach in a men's maximum security prison, I really believe in second chances for everybody in a way that could sometimes make people feel uncomfortable. But I think there has to be some sort of like self-awareness and then some type of ownership and then work toward actually changing. And then I'd be more inclined to to also like give him a chance. But he doesn't do any of that. So to me, after that article, yeah, he comes out even looking worse than he did going in, which wasn't great to start with. So
Well, I mean, I wonder if it's worth talking about sort of the controversy of the article itself and the fact that, I mean, I first encountered it as a series of screenshots on Twitter because people were really campaigning hard to not click on it because they thought sort of reading it on the website would be sort of an endorsing of giving Whedon a platform and that kind of thing. It's a controversial idea. Some people go different ways on that, but people were definitely discussing it as being a puff piece and giving him a platform and everything. And yet it's so complicated, right? Because by giving him that platform, we got this side of the story that really seemed to put the nail in the coffin of his career. I think a lot of people have seen it as. And yet there are these gestures in the piece that draw sympathy to him, you know, talking about him, you know, he looks thin and tired because he's sad about all the stuff he did, which is the typical language that we expect from a puff piece. You know, it's expected to be somewhat sympathetic to the person being interviewed. And yet so many of the actual quotes and even some of the framing of the quotes too, like the author Leela Shapiro does things throughout the piece where she notes that he gets up and goes to the bathroom when he is confronted with difficult questions, and then takes the time to note that he tells her later in the interview that he was told to do that when he encounters difficult questions. So, you know, she's participating in the kind of exposing his discomfort with things and exposing when he's staging his responses and stuff. So I think it's a really complicated article, which is partly why I find it so fascinating.
Reading that article and the tone, we are all in sort of an entertainment interview media space where, you know, we talk to people, we interview people, and I'm like, well, it's yeah, there's some puff piece there, but it's much better than I would do. It's such a weird balance because to get the interview, and I think there's newsworthiness to it. The author basically, I think, and I wouldn't presume to be in the author's head, but basically seemed to let Whedon sort of just hang himself with his own words. Again, it's newsworthy. That interview has to happen. It does amaze me because it was already called out. People have handlers. There are people whose job it is to work with celebrities, politicians, athletes, what have you, that have screwed up royally and help them fix the damage they've done to their career. And we're in a world where Michael Vick, Mel Gibson, Charlie Sheen, all people who have had some Chris Brown, all people who have had, to different degrees, royal screw-ups that should have been career killers and have all recovered to one degree or another. It's pretty amazing. Joss Whedon did a worse job in this interview than Mel Gibson, and Mel Gibson's terrible.
And that's the thing, like, obviously we live in a patriarchal culture where men do really bad things and we're quick to forgive them. Society is, sometimes it's not as quick, right? If it comes to Chris Brown or comes to certain things, but men almost always get second chances, third chances, fourth chances. And even when those statements that they make sound fake or sound rehearsed and coached, which of course they are, Joss, I don't know. I don't like to give people clinical labels because I'm not a psychiatrist or a therapist, but he comes across so narcissistic. Like maybe people are trying to give him feedback or telling him what to do and he's not listening to them. I really don't know because he doesn't seem to get it at all because he is so loved. People probably, like you even said, Brad, like you were inclined to listen to him, to forgive him, to see like if maybe he could show that he is learning anything and trying to do better. But every time he talks, it just gets worse. So I don't know why he keeps talking, I guess.
It's a thing where if he would have nailed that interview, if he would have said the right things, if he would have said, like, I was a terrible boss, I screwed up royally, I owe a lot of people an apologies, I'm going to try to make good on it, I'm trying to go back to my roots and start small and prove that I'm worth the opportunity, and then reveal that he was working on Dr. Horrible too. if he were to say that, and if he had stuck the landing on the apology, I would have. I think I would have checked that out, and I would have made excuses. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I would have had the moral fortitude to see through it, but I don't know. But he definitely would have had a shot. But no, instead, he gave a really crappy interview. It seems like he's always trying to be the smartest guy in the room. And the line that really stuck with me was taking shots at Ray Fisher, calling him a bad actor in both senses or in multiple senses. I was like, that did not help him at all.
Right. Why? A malevolent force? I mean, that's so dramatic even. Like, what are you what are you doing? I don't.
Also, just to take a shot at his acting. It's like that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it felt petty in a way that didn't lend his claims any, that didn't help his claims, let's put it that way. I mean, I've read the Ray Fisher variety stuff as well and have no trouble believing that everything he said about Hollywood being super racist is completely accurate.
Hollywood was a place that at one point they were talking about Julia Roberts starring as Harriet Tubman.
Well, I mean, with the apology thing, Brad, I was thinking of, this is all bound up in how people think about quote-unquote cancel culture, and I'm putting that in scare quotes because people use that term entirely the wrong way, because the people that get canceled are not the people who think people get canceled actually get canceled. So many of these people that supposedly get canceled, like Joss Whedon, never actually get canceled, and people that actually get canceled are far more likely to be people who are already more on the fringes, minoritized people who don't have power, are far more likely to be successfully canceled than these super powerful guys who always seem to come back. Useful comparison might be Dan Harmon, who had sort of some scandals surrounding him about the way that he was treating people and everything, and he did come out with like a pretty decent apology, and people were pretty quick to forgive him. I mean, people like his work, the apology seemed genuine, and we've kind of moved on from that scandal because I think most people are willing to forgive people when they take accountability. No one's obligated to forgive anybody for anything, especially people who are personally involved. And yet, I think as a culture, we want to forgive all types of people. We want to believe people can change. We want to believe that people can be reflective enough to be good people, right? And yet, the total lack of accountability here, I think, is the thing that we keep coming back to.
Just to add to the cancel culture, because I actually wrote cancel culture in scare quotes myself because of this quote. He said, people have been using every weaponizable word of the modern era to make it seem like I was an abusive monster. And that just seemed like, when I read that, I'm like, oh, he's trying to say this is some kind of cancel culture, that everyone is just using, his words against him. Well, you're the one that said it. Like, you're the one that did it. He says, I think I'm one of the nicest showrunners. So yeah, just no accountability and just accusing other people. You're just out here trying to cancel me.
Taking shot at Ray Fisher, saying he's not a good actor. Ray Fisher is a completely fine actor. Basically making it sound like Charisma Carpenter was manipulated by other people to turn against him. And that Gal Gadot doesn't speak, because English isn't her first language, she didn't understand what he said. It's like,
that was so offensive. Sorry.
That was probably the most out and out offensive part for me, yeah.
Don't take shots at Gal Gadot. She's smart. She is at a peak of her career. She's well liked, and who has no craps to give about this, and just says, like, I understood perfectly. And it's like, yeah, of course she did. It was so ridiculous, so dismissive. And again, there's ways he could have done it. He could have just said, it's like, it was a stressful shoot. I didn't handle things very well. I was brought in last minute. I had a bad relationship with some people, and I handled it badly, and I apologize. If he would have done that, instead he has to say, like, oh, well, she doesn't even understand the words I said. It's like, yeah, you just keep screwing up.
It's just more evidence of how he really feels about women, particularly. And that the whole issue of power and like his perceived superiority, which when he talks about, being a better feminist than the feminists in his class and all of that in school, but so many of the stories in this piece are just about him like cruelly wielding power against other women, like whether it was Arden Lee or whether it was the writer who he got everyone in the room to berate for 90 minutes.
just destroying someone. There's a thing in sports and business and entertainment of the idea of breaking someone down to build them up. I always thought it was crap. Just a way for people who like hurting people and like being the smartest person in the room and like showing that they can lord that superiority. It's just a chance for them to do it with an excuse. And I always thought that was crap.
And what's so crappy about it is that's exactly how he seems to wield feminism for gain, for sexual gain, to have affairs, for power, to use as a shield against criticism of himself, cover for all of his affairs. So it's like he intellectualized feminism and then discovered how to use it for his own self-gain and then used it as a shield when any criticism came his way. So it's just this article, like, I wasn't really inclined to really like Joss Whedon after learning everything I learned about him, but I don't know, like, he almost comes across, I don't like to use the word evil, but just so devious and calculated.
And there's just so many irresistible metaphors at play, too, with, him controlling women and then being a showrunner who designs women that he can control. And that gets us right back to the dollhouse question, right? I mean, I've often studied things about female action heroes within the context of video games and stuff, and sort of the power fantasies involved there. And, a figure like Lara Croft or something, where it's like you could see feminism and empowerment in a character like that, but a huge part of the appeal is men playing as her, which you would think could be like a mode of identification or something, but so often it's just a power fantasy of controlling that female body. And even when you're controlling that female body, doing athletic things, being a hero, killing monsters, whatever it is, it's still that element of control there. And just when I think about him, like as a showrunner for all these supposedly feminist shows, this just lends such a dark element to that. And I think that's why friends that I know that Buffy was just so important to them, like so formative for them, I have been telling them, you can still like it. Lots of people worked on that show. You can still like this show. It's not just Whedon. And yet I can see why that's not good enough for a lot of people, just because so many of sort of the themes of his personal life start to seem like they're reflected in the text. Everything is apples and oranges. Two cases are not the same. But I thought at one point that I could keep watching the Woody Allen movies that I liked. And it got to a point where I realized that is impossible. I was like, Manhattan's a formative movie for me. It was really important to me at various points in my life. And I can't watch it anymore because it's just the personal life of the person impacts that text too much. And as much as you would like to still enjoy it and enjoy it separately, and you're not giving the person money, you're not doing anything, it just kind of becomes impossible. And I know that for a lot of fans, they are feeling that way about some of Whedon's productions. And it's really sad that they have to feel that way.
Woody Allen is especially challenging because first off, Woody Allen is in so many of the movies.
Yeah, that too.
Also, when you rewatch him, it's like he seems to be making excuses for his own behavior or normalizing his own proclivities. Or there was way too many movies of Woody Allen having a relationship with a 20-something, and then is that a teen-something?
Manhattan. Yeah.
And it's tough because Woody Allen is an excellent writer and an interesting director, and in the right role, he's an interesting presence that you don't see anything. The really smart, nebbish guy who still is the romantic lead, and you could sort of buy it sometimes because there was an amount of charm to him, and then it's like okay, it does get hard to watch because it's him. Joss Whedon, you could sometimes excuse it because there's a couple of layers. Okay, well, he's the writer-director, but let's be honest, who really cares about writer-directors? Most directors I couldn't pick out of a lineup. I'm pretty sure the Russo brothers, who did Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, I could be behind them in line at the store and I wouldn't recognize them. But Whedon was this weird thing where he was this celebrity showrunner, writer, director, and that doesn't happen a whole lot. It's weird. It's hard to have that space because I know who Joss Whedon is. I really liked him. I thought he was cool. When Avengers comes on or whatever it is, for both of you, can you watch it? Or are you flipping the channel? Or are you like just turning off the TV? Where are you now with the work he's done?
Well, I mean, There were already things I had issues with in kind of his Avengers movies. I mean, the stuff involving Black Widow mostly. The scene with Loki in the Avengers movie that some people had issues with at the time, where he uses some offensive language towards her. It is what it is. And then the subplot about her being a monster because she's infertile was something also that I had a lot of issues with. So, again, those critiques aren't sort of new to me, but it is actually a really good question. Like, I don't know, I've taught the Avengers movie before, and I actually loved that movie so much when it came out. And yet, this latest piece does make it hard. It is more stuff than we had before. And to me, that's one of the defenses for the piece existing. You know, I brought up the controversy earlier of should this piece even exist? And a lot of people are like, no, we don't need to hear more of this. But I think people actually did need to hear more, some people anyway, because people who are really like sort of immersed in certain nerd spaces did know a lot of this stuff already, but a lot of people aren't in those spaces. A lot of people aren't online. They're not following what Charisma Carpenter tweeted, you know, a year ago about it. Like, they hadn't read the letter from his ex-wife. Like, all of this stuff hadn't really been collected in one place. And it hadn't been collected in one place with all of this very revealing commentary from Whedon. So to me, I think that there's real value to the article. And I can certainly see that, well, value. It sounds, you know, value in a depressing sense, I guess, because even as someone who wasn't a super big fan of Whedon, who was already suspicious of him going into this piece, I feel worse about it now. I definitely feel worse about it. And it's just, yeah, it's been a piece that's made me reflect on a lot of stuff, you know, in terms of my own interactions with people and some of the things like the writer, Rebecca X, like the section about her in the piece where she's saying, I don't know if it was abusive. How am I supposed to tell if something's abusive? And that really hit home for me because that's something that we all face, but it is very much a female thing in the sense that we are often trying to please people and we often try to minimize these kinds of situations. And at a certain point, we can't tell when we're being treated right or wrong because we've all been taught the same lessons about pleasing men, being nice to men, being nice to everybody. And it can be really hard sometimes. And again, that's why I find some of the conversations in this piece really important. And that's certainly part of why it resonated with me so much.
The part of the article with Rebecca X, it was really interesting because when she said, I have a soft spot for abusive men, that quote isn't exact, but paraphrased, that's what she said. She's like, I didn't know. And like, if it was abusive, there were these things that I questioned. There were these things going on in the office or where we were working that didn't seem quite right. But it's like she's describing it as this gray area and then saying like, well, maybe I'm not the best person to talk to about this because I do have that penchant for, or do have an issue kind of with abusive men. That was really powerful too. I feel like they, or her interview in the piece was kind of served as a defense of Whedon, or maybe they were like using her interview as defending him or being on his side, but it was really telling. You said like how we're brought up in a patriarchal society to overlook a lot of things and to excuse a lot of things. As for Joss Whedon's work, I still would watch some of it. Obviously, I've been following him and the story and all of this for years, and I would still watch his work. On a really selfish level, and this is very selfish, it's more difficult having read this piece. I feel like I don't know if I could turn something on, like if I could turn Buffy. I don't think I could and not think about him and not think about the words and the stories from all of these women and not think about the things that he said himself. And on a selfish level, like that sucks because there are few things that I really resonate with. And yeah, there are even like critiques of things in Buffy. There were even tells of like his brand of feminism back then, but having like a show where you just really resonate with the characters, where you really identify, and then having that taken away. And I know like what you said, anybody can watch Buffy or watch whatever they want. A lot of people work on those shows. It's not just him, but it's more just having those thoughts or being reminded of like everything that he said or did while watching it makes it a rather unpleasant experience of one that used to be comforting. I don't know. I can't say I'll never watch anything that he does again, but it's hard to watch it the same way. And it's not like a go-to comfort thing anymore.
That's so moving to hear you say that, and it's so right, because this guy messed up people's lives, and then he's still like messing up our lives by taking away something that we drew strength and comfort from, and that makes me want to just like keep watching something like Buffy or Firefly out of defiance. The fans own this, you can't take this away from me. You've taken things away from people already, and yet it's so hard to do that, because I think I'm with you that I think about this piece, and I don't know how I couldn't think about it if I was watching Buffy in particular, but a number of other things as well. It's so hard.
As you were saying that, I was just thinking about the fact that based on things that he said in the interview, he would probably get a perverse pleasure of knowing how he hurt all of his women like basically what he did to the people he worked with and the people he had relationships with is almost now what he's doing to his fans, setting something up that isn't really real and then taking it away from them. That seems to be a pattern for him. And in some of these relationships, like Ardently, her talking about how she told him that one of her most traumatic experiences was being dumped by someone she really cared about, that she loved, that she was with right before her birthday. And then he waits until like the day before her birthday and goes over to her house and dumps her. Like, that's so calculated. Like, and so many of the stories are similar versions of that. Just that building someone up, people are saying, just to then use that information or use that power to tear them down later. And now it's like he's almost carried that dynamic over with his fans. Like, he made all of his fans trust him and think that he was someone that he really isn't. And now he's just like pulling the rug under all of them too.
We wouldn't be going through this if he hadn't presented himself as something that he clearly wasn't. And if he had been a recluse or avoided interviews, it wouldn't cut so deep. And there's always been signs that his ego was pretty huge. I mean, it's so telling. And I know during a previous conversation, they've been toying around about the bad relationship that he has with Sarah Michelle Gellar, and more or less come to light where allegedly she didn't even want to be on set with him and didn't talk with him directly during the final years of the show. I think it was Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar's husband, intimated that what was frustrating is it seems like Joss Whedon wanted so much credit for her success. It seemed like he didn't feel she kissed his ring enough for making her a star, which I talked about this previous, where Sarah Michelle Gellar was really important to Buffy the Vampire Slayer because she brought some star power. Say what you will about her as an actress. I don't think she's a great actress by any stretch, but she definitely has presence and charisma. And Joss Whedon needed that. Like, he gave her a lead role that was very different for the time. A 5'0" 95-pound woman wasn't given action roles. And she was the lead, and he gave her some great dialogue and some pathos. But she gave him star power, which he didn't have. I think it's telling that his most successful shows are Buffy and Angel. David Boreanaz. Again, I don't think David Boreanaz is a great actor necessarily, but he does have presence, and he's definitely a TV star. It struck me that he was always bothered that the pretty people and the charismatic people get the acclaim that he wants. So I think that's why he does do these interviews, because he wants people to believe in him, and he wants to be the star, and he wants to be the center of attention. And it seems to be that's his Achilles, is he keeps going for that. If he would just be quiet and quietly write and direct and whatever, he wouldn't be in this situation.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so tempting, right? I mean, as Sarah said earlier, to kind of want to psychoanalyze him or something, but it just does seem so just classically narcissistic the way he can't actually perceive the wrong of his own behavior. And he is just so desperate to be seen that he is willing to shoot himself in the foot just for the sake of being seen. And it's just like, oof. It's just sort of like watching the train wreck of someone giving into their worst impulses.
Did either of you watch The Nevers, the HBO show?
No.
I did not, no.
Are you familiar with it? Is it on your was it on your radar at all?
I remember it. I mean, I remember them removing him as the showrunner and stuff, but I wasn't really sure what happened to it after that, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, because as you said, it was a show, and again, it was a female-led show taking place during, I want to say, the early 1900s or maybe the 1800s. Everyone was so excited because it was a female-led show on HBO, which gives creators and showrunners a lot of leeway. So it's going to be Joss Whedon with the reins off, and then it was delayed. It seemed like it was taking forever to get the show running. It was getting close to release date, and then all this came out, and he was removed as showrunner, but he still wrote most of the season and directed a lot of it. And of course, then HBO is in a weird situation where people were excited about the show, and now they were already invested and just trying to remove his name from it. I know one or two people that watched it and enjoyed it to a degree, but all the problems that have already been called out, like going into something new that he did, knowing what he's about and all the stuff we find out about him is like, oh, okay, yeah, this is very uncomfortable. Do you think if word hadn't come out about this, do you think you would have watched that? Is it a thing where, okay, you might go back to Dr. Horrible, Firefly, whatever, but if he does something new, you're going to avoid it?
Yeah, I don't think I'd be inclined to watch anything new that he does. The Nevers, to me, it had an interesting premise, but I actually only knew what it was because of the controversy surrounding like his involvement.
Same, actually.
And do you see yourself ever? And it could be anything from, he was a pretty successful comic book writer when he did a great run on Runaways.
An X-Men run, astonishing X-Men, yeah.
So it could be a comic book, it could be another internet specific piece like Dr. Horrible. Do you see yourself ever checking out anything new that he does, or is it just too hard?
I think unless there was some kind of reckoning with his own actions, yes, I'm definitely not interested in checking out anything he does in the future. But I mean, there are complicated conversations about that too. Like, I feel a lot of pressure sort of as a person who is supposed to care about the right things to not be supporting certain creators. And I think a lot about, even when I do like a comic book, say that's by a problematic creator, like I have read a lot of Warren Ellis comic books. If your listeners aren't familiar with what Warren Ellis has done, he's done some pretty bad things. And that's hard, right? Because do I tweet about what this comic book meant to me, or will people see that as an endorsement of Warren Ellis? And I always think about that if I'm going to share anything like that publicly. With Whedon's comics too. I mean, in Astonishing X-Men, he wrote the character of Kitty Pryde in that series, and the character of Kitty Pryde is a character that he's been on the record as saying was centrally the inspiration for Buffy, sort of Kitty Pryde as she appeared in the Chris Claremont X-Men comics in the 80s into the 90s. And so when I think about that series and I think about his characterization of that character, I can't sort of unsee some of his ticks in that either. So yeah, I don't know. Like, again, we all want to believe in forgiveness. I want nothing more than for people to learn from their mistakes and change. I'm not in favor of people doing bad things and we're just going to lock them in a closet forever and not allow them any opportunity to sort of live. But at the same time, I don't think any of us are obligated to give money into a platform to somebody who, I mean, let's be real, is already rich and famous, and he doesn't really have to do anything for the rest of his life. He's not owed that. So yeah, unless there was some much, much, much better reckoning with the things that he's done than we have here, I'm definitely not interested in checking out future work, and I'm going to have a complicated relationship with all past work, I think.
Last question before I want you guys to plug your pluggables, of course. What do you think's in the future for Joss Whedon? You think there's another movie, TV show, or something? He's a straight white guy. Speaking as the same, we get a lot of shots. what do you think that shot is, or do you think there's not a, or do you think he's done too much damage to himself?
I think if he can be quiet, maybe for a good year or so, I don't know if he's capable of that, then I think he probably will get another shot. I don't know to what degree or, yeah, like how big the opportunity will be, but I think he definitely will get another shot. I really wish that he would be able to self reflect, like in that time before he does. Like, I really just want him to get it. And there's not a single thing that I've read or heard that he said that makes me think that he does. It's not even like, okay, well, he sort of says this and it sounds like he gets it, but then he also says that. It's like, no, he doesn't seem to get it at all. So I think his best shot is just being quiet, laying low, not doing interviews like this, not saying anything. And I think enough people, like the majority of people, aren't necessarily really focused or paying that much attention to these types of social critiques, that if he does do something, he probably will get a pass. So, yeah, I mean, I think he will get another shot, and I hope he does change, but I don't see any indication of that.
Yeah, I'm really thinking about it too. And as much as we want to forgive him, I think there's an even stronger impulse to forgive him around like certain critics and stuff. I mean, most of the people who review and work in television are straight white men rather like Whedon. A lot of them feel very freaked out by Me Too and by the reckoning that goes on. And I think that there's an impulse among a lot of those people to want to forgive people like Whedon because they're self-projecting onto Whedon a little bit. So I do find it believable that he could just not say anything for a year or two and then just have another job. And so many of the people that review it won't mention this scandal at all because they'll just be like, I don't have an obligation to talk about that. Whereas if you're a woman or another minoritized person in these spaces, you of course do have an obligation to talk about it, which I'm not saying that that's fair, but it's reality. But the thing that I think might be a stopping point in his case, and this isn't a prediction, I don't know what will happen, but so much of his work was dependent on him as a celebrity creator and was dependent on the fan base that he cultivated. And that fan base, not everybody, but a lot of that fan base is just so strongly against him now that I think it will be difficult unless he is going to be able to be successful without relying on that fan base at all. So it will require quite a reinvention. And I don't know. I agree that he'll get a second shot, or whatever, second shot, fifth shot, whatever it is at this point. But I don't know what will happen with that. He certainly won't be the same creator that he was. And again, maybe that would lead to more reflection, maybe not, but I don't know. I'm perversely curious to see what happens, that's for sure.
I know I talked with Scott Corelli from the Genre Media podcasting group, and his belief was Whedon will find work doing script doctoring work. He's viewed as a talent, and he did that work before because he worked on scripts for X-Men and Toy Story and other stuff. It's like he could see them hiring him to punch up scripts, which you can get paid a lot of money to do. That was really the last half of Carrie Fisher's life, was punching up scripts that people didn't realize she worked on. Scott thought that was probably the end of it. Like, he's just done too much damage to himself. And like you said, his fan base is so reliant on him being viewed as the feminist director-writer. I could see a thing where, doing that script doctor work and then being brought in to direct an episode of Legends of Tomorrow or one of the CW superhero shows or something like that. I know he directed a couple episodes of The Office and Glee. So getting TV director work, I don't think there's any way that he will be given another franchise. He's not going to direct Batgirl. He's not going to direct Captain Marvel 3 or whatever. First off, there's not a lot of jobs like that, and it takes a long time to get those shots. And then once you lose it, it takes a long time to get it back. I mean, Mel Gibson wrecked his career, and very, very slowly, by not doing interviews and keeping his mouth shut and doing a lot of B movies, got shots to do what was the movie that he did with did with the second Spider-Man, that it got some Oscar consideration.
Oh, I know. I know what you mean, but yeah.
But still, Mel Gibson is not being given big budgets to do stuff. He has to do his B movies, keep his mouth shut, and then every now and then they'll give him a small budget prestige piece that he can do, and finds actors who aren't at the peak of their drawing power that are willing to work with him. I think Joss Whedon is going to have a real tough time doing that. I don't know what's going to happen. He's going to direct something, but I do think it'll probably be something very small. It's a shame because I was looking forward to the Nevers. I was looking forward when they announced that he was going to direct a Batgirl film. Aside from wrecking his own career, I think he robbed people of a lot of really good entertainment because I do think he's a good director and a good writer. But as people just can't get out of their way sometimes. So on that happy note, Sarah, plug your pluggables because you're a favorite guest of mine and you're so dang smart, so insightful. So where can people get more Sarah Black?
So you can hear me on Life as a Playlist, which is my show that combines memoir and music and social and political commentary. Or you can follow me on TikTok where I make daily videos that are primarily social and political commentary at CommLion. That's CommLion.
I love your work so much, and I'm so envious and so impressed because you do something that I don't. You let people in a way that I find so courageous. This will be like the 253rd episode of this show. People know that I'm married and they know how I have kids and they know I'm really like Ben Folds, and that's about it. If they listen real close, maybe they'll be able to glean a little bit more information. I don't have the bravery or the confidence in my opinions and thoughts and political leanings and political beliefs to do that. And I'm so impressed with people that can do it and do it so well. And you do it so well. And I recommend everyone check that out because you're smart, you're entertaining, and you're gutsy. And it's really cool. And I really like people who can do stuff very well that I can't do at all. So I recommend everyone check that out.
Thank you.
Well, Brad, you're here providing a wonderful platform for people to talk about really interesting things. And I think you're underselling yourself a little bit too.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like I'm a really good platform. That's what I do well.
Another better way of putting that would be that you're a people person who fosters productive connections.
I love that. And that's true. You know, I have so much social anxiety, and I'm also autistic, which is a communication disorder, among other things. And you're the only show I'm not afraid to go on. I will have a little bit of anxiety before I come on here and speak because I always have anxiety before I speak, even teaching. So it's an odd career choice that, I chose. But yes, you do that exceptionally well. I'll be like, well, it's Brad's show. He's super nice. He's going to make us feel comfortable. He's going to help drive the conversation. It's going to be okay. So I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Anna, Doc, what do you got going on? You are the creator of what has quickly become my favorite T-shirt, which I wear proudly once a week. Talk about it.
Yeah, well, the T-shirt Brad is referring to is a T-shirt from the Oh Gosh, Oh Golly, Oh Wow podcast, on which I will never stop when I'm on this podcast saying that Brad was the first ever guest. And it's a podcast where every week we reread and analyze with a bunch of smart people an issue of the classic Marvel comic book series Excalibur. It's an X-Men title from the 80s and 90s. Yeah, we did a t-shirt drive in December to raise money for Planned Parenthood, and Brad bought one of those t-shirts, and I'm so happy that he enjoys it. In terms of other stuff that I do, you can also catch me writing for various places online, lots of comic book websites, Middle Spaces, Shelf Dust, Comic Book Herald, Comics XF. And you can also check out my book, Super Sex, Sexuality, Fantasy, and the Superhero, available wherever fine books are sold. Oh, and I'm on Twitter, of course, at just my name, Peppard_Anna. You can find me usually talking about comics and often talking about the X-Men character Nightcrawler over there.
Oh, so much love for Nightcrawler you have. Well, this has been amazing. Obviously, you two are always at my top of my list of people to bring back. We're going to do this again. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excuse me. I really appreciate it. And it was nice to meet you, Anna.
It was very nice to meet you. And I actually really appreciated having a chance to talk about this difficult but important topic. So thank you.
Snaps, episode 252. Big thanks to Sarah Black and Dr. Anna Peppard. They will both be back soon. Also, big thanks to Katie. She has the best questions. Next time on the Cosmic Geppetto podcast, author, friend, and fellow Lock Haven alum, Tim Burdick is back. I'm not sure how much value there is bragging that we both went to a little-known Pennsylvania State College, but here we are. Till then, in the words of Jarf Hardin,
see you in the funny pages.
Subscribe to the Cosmic Geppetto podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever quality podcasts can be found. Rate and review us while there. Follow us on Twitter at CosmicGPod, and we will follow you back. Unless you're a jerk. We don't follow jerks. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cosmic Geppetto. We love hearing your ideas for upcoming episodes. Email us at cosmicgeppetto@comcast.net.
my company provided free mental health care, and it's online. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm talking with the counselor. I was like, listen, it was a tough year, but hey, I understand everyone else is having a tough year, and I got real lucky, or I ended up with a better job and more money, and everything's great. She's like, so you just minimize everything that happens to you? He's like, yeah. There is truth to that, and it's always the difference of trying to appreciate that other people go through more difficult things, but you get to the point where then you don't allow yourself to feel bad for your bad days.
Exactly, because someone's always going to have it better and someone's always going to have it worse. And that's not to minimize anyone's things or say, shouldn't celebrate other people or shouldn't help out other people, because sometimes that is pretty cliche too, other people have it better or worse. But I just mean in the way of, it's okay to care about our own stuff without feeling guilty about it.